Hey everybody, this is Grimmy, and today I'm going to be talking about my OC Weirdo. Weirdo is the main character to my story called Mishaps, and is, well, a bit of an oddball. I've noticed some people in the comments of videos he's in finding him, attractive, and being interested in him. So instead of going on endless tangents and generally being a mess, I'm just going to adapt his character sheet into a video, because honestly, that's the easiest way to do it. Weirdo is a 27-year-old Irishman. Other names and nicknames he goes by are Weirdo Vincent, which is his legal name, although he never refers to himself as Mr. Vincent, and most people don't know about his last name. Freak Show or Freak, which was previously an insult and is now just a normal friendly nickname. He's called Kiddo by Father Anthony, and Babyface by his friends when they want to tease him. He was born in Ireland on the 31st October, so Halloween, and he speaks with a strong Irish accent. I like to think he speaks like Jacksepticeye or with a similar sounding voice. He speaks English fluently and is quite knowledgeable in the art of sarcasm. Weirdo is a straight single Pringle not ready to mingle because he's incompetent with romance. Seriously, he can't, don't even try. He's a Roman Catholic, not a very good one, but he tries, and is a hotel manager, as well as a part-time mercenary. Currently, Weirdo is a citizen of the micronation Međumaslina, situated in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Međumaslina is a fictional town I have created for the story. I'm not going to get into it because that's a whole different topic, but if I ever do finish the information sheet on it, I'll make a video. Weirdo has 4 main hobbies. Number 1. Research. Weirdo researches on absolutely everything and anything that interests him, mainly people he wants to kill. He has a lot of files on people. Number 2. Reading comic books. Mostly American stuff, but he also likes Franco-Belgian comics books like Tintins, Lucky Luke, Asterix and Obelix, and those kind of books. Number 3. Working out. Weirdo is really strict on himself to keep fit so he can complete his mercenary jobs without problem. And it's also an outlet. Number 4. Snacking. This contradicts the previous point, but due to his abilities, Weirdo needs to snack in order to stay healthy. He likes trying new and weird foods and non-foods. Here's how I would describe Weirdo's appearance. Weirdo stands tall at 6'2", 189 centimeters, with wide shoulders and a lean muscular physique, weighing at 98 kilograms, or 216 pounds. He has messy, fluffy-looking turquoise hair, as well as a turquoise tail about the length of his legs, with a tuft at the end of it. His eyes have no pupils, and his sclera are magenta, with rather long eyelashes for a man. While his outfit varies every day, a typical outfit for him are light grey slim-fit jeans, a dark grey O-neck tank top, a dark blue lightweight parka with a grey furred hood, and grey-green Converses. He also has a small black crucifix on a silver chain around his neck, which he never takes off. His teeth are all pointed and sharp, his upper and lower canines and the first premolars being the longest among them. You'll usually see him with a smile or a grin on his face. The inside of his mouth is the same colour as his eyes. His skin is fairly pale, and a small detail is that he doesn't grow any body hair at all, so he's got soft skin. He gets teased a lot for that by his friends. Moving on to Weirdo's personality, I want to make note of one thing. Weirdo's personality is meant to be confusing and indiscernible for the normal person. That's the whole point of his character. Weirdo's personality is generally viewed by others as conflicted and to not make much sense. Such an example is that Weirdo doesn't take things seriously at all, yet isn't reckless. He considers things such as death, murder, and torture funny, unable to bring himself to care when such things affect other people, usually because he's the one who has inflicted those things on others. He even considers his part-time mercenary job as a kind of joke, yet never leaves any evidence on any scene he's been at, but also tends to play around with the police to annoy them for his own amusement. Same thing when it comes to fighting. Despite this, he's incredibly cautious when he's on a job, and he's very careful at keeping those jobs a secret from his community. Weirdo can be considered the incarnation of politically incorrect. Not because he's malicious, he's just painfully honest and has no filter, because he doesn't get how to be appropriate. He doesn't get why people get so offended and touchy about certain topics or nicknames and will mock, tease and rile up anybody who gets angry at him for something he said or did. Weirdo gets easily irritated around over-emotional or dramatic people, usually snapping at them or, in the most extreme cases, knocking them out so that they shut up. He can't deal with emotions well and is more often than not quite insensitive. However, he is quite empathetic to and understanding of children. Weirdo bases a lot of his actions on instinct, which makes him impulsive. If he wants to do something, anything, he will do it, just because he can and wants to. And he absolutely will go through anybody who tries to stop him. How he goes through that person depends on the context of the situation. This is the same with the mercenary jobs. He only takes those that he wants to take, since they must be fun to him. He's very picky in that aspect. However, even with these traits, Weirdo is an active member of his neighbourhood, not only helping during volunteering work in his local parish, but also being overall a good and friendly neighbour that others really like, even with his run-in with the police. His neighbourhood isn't aware of his part-time job. People consider him very trustworthy and people easily depend on him. He helps his employees out too when they need it, and is a pleasant host at his hotel, making sure his guests are happy. Weirdo is very affectionate to everybody in his community. He's a sort of neighbour that you can call up at any time to babysit your kids, and he'll do it for free just because he loves spending time with the children, and said children love spending time with him, because he knows a lot of fun games, usually lets them break the rules a little, go to bed a little later, unhealthy dinners, stuff like that, and is just generally good with children. He's seen as a big brother of sorts by the community's children, and their parents look out for Weirdo as if he was an older son. Weirdo likes to spend time with his closest friends, Sam, Frederick, Matthew and William, who he loves to meet up at the bar with and just chat and joke with them. The way Weirdo shows affection to others is through hugs, giving presents, and actively making space in his schedule to spend time with someone. He's the type of guy that will hug his friends to greet them, carry a kid on his shoulder, and kiss someone on the head. Despite the whole doesn't like emotional people part, Weirdo is quite open with his platonic affection to those he considers friends. It confused people a bit at first, but they soon realised it was just Weirdo being friendly. While he seems the obnoxious type, Weirdo is actually mild-mannered towards others, unless provoked, even in his manner of speech despite a strong accent. He also seems like an idiotic airhead, which isn't true. Weirdo can understand instructions and explanations well, but he asks a lot of questions until he's satisfied that he's fully understood them. Weirdo has described himself as a curious learner, but retains only the information as either useful or interesting to him. This is why he struggles with long, scientific words, but is able to memorize lots of information about dangerous criminals, or his favourite comic book characters. His intelligence mostly applies when he is put in action, able to process multiple information streams, such as threat assessments, and rapidly respond to changing tactical situations, and while he mostly acts on instinct, he is able to create tactics on plans. Although some people, like Chasina, a policewoman, keep an eye on him since they believe that his whole personality is one big act, and believe him to be a lot more dangerous than he puts on, in terms of how cruel and manipulative he might actually be. Chasina's reasoning for her theory is that Weirdo's personality clashes too much for it to be genuine. When faced with such accusations, Weirdo is very dismissive. Generally speaking though, Weirdo just acts pleasant to everyone, usually in a positive mood. Yeah, he's a bit of an oddball. Moving on to Weirdo's likes and dislikes. Weirdo really likes fresh raspberries, Nutella crepes, bars of soap, beer, especially blonde ales, going to the bar, especially on Saturday nights, furred hoods and hoodies, raw meat, adrenaline rushes, he's an adrenaline junkie, wildlife and animals, and strong, loud, stormy weathers. On the other hand, Weirdo dislikes licorice, lassie, heavy liquors and spirits, rusty metals, hot tropic weathers, problems in his hotel, people who over-exaggerate things, overreact to things, complain for no reason, act spoilt, or think they're special when they're not, Father Anthony being angry at him, children being hurt, and hairdryers. The next section is about Weirdo's abilities and oddities. Weirdo has Hamartia disease, better known by its common name, Mishap. This is a made-up illness and is a title to the series Weirdo is a protagonist of, Mishaps. Like with the fictional country, I'm not going to go into it because that's a whole topic on its own, but basically, mishaps are mutants. Weirdo is classified as a Diamond type A0 mishap, making him both a rare and dangerous mishap. Powers: matter ingestion and related minor abilities. Weirdo's teeth can bite through everything, absolutely everything, no exception. He can also eat all kinds of poisons as either liquids or solids, but not gases, which is explained in weaknesses, and won't be affected at all. So he can eat or drink anything he wants and won't die or get sick. Because of this, his stomach acid is incredibly acidic, since it needs to digest things like metal, rocks, poisons, and convert it into energy Weirdo can use. This means that his saliva is also very acidic when he wants it to be in order to soften the food. So if he was to spit in somebody's face with it, the saliva would melt or burn that part of their face. The same would happen with objects. And the same would happen if somebody or something touched his stomach acid somehow, although the stomach acid would be a lot more potent than the saliva. Also, because of the fact that he eats dangerous foods, this means his body is very tolerant to such things. So if you were to inject him with poison in his arm, or even a sickness or virus, it would be as if you had just injected food into his bloodstream instead, and the injection would have no effect. In this way, his blood also has a high amount of acidity, although it's nowhere near as harmful as his saliva. The most it might do is burn slightly, but won't leave a mark. Talking about injections, Weirdo's skin acts as a sort of container for all the acidity in his body. So his body is fairly dense, meaning that most things won't pierce his skin enough to make him bleed. While it would leave a mark on his skin, like if he was to be burned, but only the top layer of his skin would actually be affected, while the rest of his body wouldn't be hurt. This depends on the sharpness, velocity, intensity, and such of a weapon. The most common weapons like knives and handguns won't affect him. However, things like arrows, swords, and machine guns that are more advanced could have a chance of injuring him. Body alterations. Not to be confused with body modification. Considering that his matter ingestion ability needs his saliva and stomach acid to be particularly acidic, if Weirdo was to use a straw to drink and had no control over the acidity of his body, then that straw and anything else he puts in his mouth or that his saliva touches would just melt. Therefore, Weirdo is able to control the acidity levels of his saliva and stomach acid, as well as the sharpness of his teeth, meaning that while his teeth stay sharp looking, they'd be like a dull blade rather than a sharp one. So, for example, if he's eating something normal like a burger, he doesn't need his saliva and stomach acid to be able to melt through aluminium, so he's able to alter his body's acidity level to something of a normal person. Well, it seems hard to do, for him it's as easy as blinking. Sheathable claws. When he's not fighting, his claws look like normal, natural nails. However, when he is fighting, he is able to sharpen them and elongate them up to 5 centimeters, and they go from blunt nails to razor-sharp ones. Semi-immortality. Unlike full immortality, Weirdo can be killed through some of his weaknesses. However, he is a pain to get rid of. The only way he can be killed is by a specific kind of suffocation. He can't die from illnesses, and even if his head is crushed, or if he's decapitated, or if his body is in smithereens, he won't die. However, he does age, albeit much slower, and he'll eventually die of old age. In his case, he could live up to 3 times to the average lifetime of a healthy human. Enhanced recuperation. While similar to a healing factor, it is slower and more similar to how a normal human recuperates. For example, if Weirdo was to get a black eye, while it would take 1 to 2 weeks for an average person's eye to completely heal, his would take a couple of minutes instead. While for bigger injuries like a broken leg, instead of 6 to 8 weeks, it would take a day at most. So it takes time for him to completely heal up, but it takes less than half the average amount of time for his body to actually get better. In cases of a limb getting cut off, if that was ever to happen, Weirdo would be able to regrow larger limbs like arms and legs, but it would take several days, while hands and fingers would be able to regrow within a few minutes. However, being cut in half or having his head chopped off wouldn't regrow anything. Instead, he'd need to have his body put back together and left to knit itself back together. This would take a few seconds depending on how messy the cut is. If he is able to eat things that aid healing, like certain vitamins, proteins and iron, etc., then Weirdo can speed up the process by a few hours or days, depending on the circumstances of his injury. Enhanced senses and physical prowess. Mishaps like Weirdo are physically more capable than humans. Depending on the individual, their physical abilities vary. For Weirdo, his top speed is just over 400 miles per hour, 644 kilometers per hour. He can carry things up to 1,500 times his own weight. This doesn't include his tail, which is explained below, and he can jump at least twice his height. However, he can't go from a walking pace to 400 miles per hour immediately. He needs to build it up. Same thing with jumping. And the more he pushes his body to his limit, the quicker his stamina runs out. Weirdo is very flexible for a man, able to achieve ridiculous yoga poses. He doesn't do yoga, this is just an example, and stretches, which makes his movements a lot more fluid and his dodging probability a lot higher. He's an acrobatic of sorts, giving him an advantage against his enemies. For his senses, Weirdo can see things that are far away much clearer than the average person, although how far away he can actually see is about the same as a human. His ears can hear higher pitches and quiet sounds that are further away or that an average human wouldn't be able to hear. His sense of smell is a little better than that of a sniffer dog, and while he can't smell very far away, he can catch small traces of scents and recognize them almost instantly if he's smelt it before. Through training, Weirdo can push his limits, but it can create a lot of strain on his body. Empathy towards animals. While not able to talk with them, Weirdo can understand animals' sentiments of sorts, almost like a pet whisperer, but Weirdo is able to do this naturally. This is something that all Mishaps can do. This means they can communicate non-verbally to animals, although Weirdo personally tends to speak normally to animals just for his own entertainment. Pheromone control. Another ability that all Mishaps have. This pheromone control doesn't include controlling other people, rather the character being able to control their own pheromones to show off power and intimidate others into submission. So the more powerful the character, the stronger their intimidation will be. Weirdo can do this, but will only use it when provoked and when against another Mishap like him. Strengths. Experienced fighter. Weirdo doesn't have a specific fighting style, instead adapting his fighting techniques to his opponent. He knows some individual techniques of certain fighting styles, like jiu-jitsu techniques and boxing stances, although he isn't a master in any specific fighting style, since he likes to pick and choose his favourite different styles. He mostly fights dirty, using cheap tricks to keep the upper hand, and having no honour in a fight. For him, as long as he wins, it doesn't matter if what he did was unfair. Anything goes for him. He's more of a street fighter than anything, having a free-form style of fighting, which, while not unique, is difficult to predict. Knowledgeable in weaponry. While Weirdo doesn't specialise in weaponry, he has a lot of knowledge on how to use weapons, especially illegal ones. He can use a variety of guns, from standard handguns to more advanced artillery, although he doesn't tend to use big and bulky weapons since he finds them inconvenient. He's more knowledgeable in bladed weapons, such as knives and swords, although with the latter his knowledge of Japanese swords is limited, as he's more knowledgeable and experienced in fencing. Although if you give him a Japanese sword, or a katana, he'll be able to hold it properly and improvise from there. He may not know the history of a weapon, but he certainly knows how to use one, in more ways than expected. Fearless fighter. While he's an experienced fighter, Weirdo is not afraid to go headfirst into a fight. He's confident in his skills and abilities, and isn't afraid to fight someone that looks freaky, especially if he's sure he can win. He's not afraid to use himself as a decoy or to get a little hurt in order to really beat up his opponent. Nor is he afraid to play dirty. When it comes to fighting, he's very outgoing. Stealth. Even with his flashy colours, Weirdo is able to sneak around quietly, which has aided him in stealing as well as stealth attacks. While camouflaging is near impossible if he doesn't cover up his tail and hair, he is able to use the darkness in his surroundings to hide and sneak, also able to use his claws to climb walls quietly. Improvisation. An unusual, unprepared for situation takes place, Weirdo can use what he has and knows to improvise, and help him through the situation. Each improvisation depends on the circumstance, but usually he ends up successful, although his improvisation can often end up risky, and while he'll be alright, others might not. Tail. Weirdo's tail is prehensile, so he can hit people with it and hold things with it. While he can hang off it as well, it really hurts his back, so he doesn't do that often, only emergencies like if he needs to catch someone. The most it can carry is about 50 kilograms, or 110 pounds. Before you say that Weirdo is ridiculously overpowered, in the Mishaps universe, Weirdo isn't all that overpowered. He's definitely one of the most dangerous, but not the strongest, fastest, or more powerful. And anyway, he does have a few weaknesses, such as a constant need to eat. A downside of his abilities is that he has a high metabolism, to the point where he basically has to be constantly eating something to not starve to death. While he can spend a few hours without eating, that's already like not eating for 24 hours to him. And while he can eat absolutely anything, if he's starved long enough, Weirdo can be very invulnerable, weak, and easy to manipulate, since his mind becomes hazy and confused. It's also not convenient to stop in the middle of a fight to eat something. Has a lot of enemies. Because of his part-time job and having blackmailed, killed, tortured, and stolen from a lot of people, he's on a lot of important people's target list. Therefore, putting those in his community in danger, and them getting hurt is a high probability, as well as Weirdo getting into some serious trouble. Technically speaking, somebody could attack Weirdo at any moment and create a lot of damage. Short-range fighting only. Due to his abilities, unless if Weirdo has a long-range weapon, Weirdo has to fight in short-range battles only, meaning he has to get up close and personal in the situation, putting himself in the direct way of danger, which often means getting close to pain if he messes up. Also, if a character can fly or has abilities related to poisonous gases or something of that sort, Weirdo cannot fight them, unless he has become prepared, which, if he is ambushed, will become a dangerous situation for him. Intolerant to poisonous gases. While any poison that is liquid and solid that goes into his digestive system doesn't hurt him or kill him, if poisonous gas or something of that equivalent goes into his respiratory system, he's just as vulnerable and affected by it as anybody else, and since he's semi-immortal, his death would be much slower and painful. This would be because his lungs would fill up with gas that his blood cannot carry, like oxygen or carbon dioxide, and he would suffocate from his lungs filling up with thick gas and his blood being slowed down from the heavy gas particles, unable to flow around his body, similarly to how carbon monoxide is fatal. That would slow down his body enough to kill him. Tail is his weak point. Pulling, stepping, or injuring his tail will cause excruciating pain, as if somebody was indirectly messing with his spine. Because he doesn't hide his tail, that's what people tend to target, and due to its bright colour and length, it's an obvious target. Senses can be overpowered. Since his senses are enhanced, he's more sensitive to very high-pitched noises, a loud dog whistle, very strong smells, but smell of burning charcoal in a stuffy room, repetitive strong flashing lights, nightclubs, and those kind of things. While he can usually push through such things, if these things are intensified to a certain point, Weirdo will be in physical pain and vulnerable. Does things on impulse. Half the things he does are unprepared and decisions of the moment sort of actions, which can either mess things up for others or him, even worsen a situation. While he usually is able to pull whatever it is off, the consequences can mean him ending up in trouble or something getting worse. Also, since it's unprepared, it means that other people aren't aware of what he might be doing, and they might get caught up in his shenanigans, or if he's working with somebody else, he might put them in danger because they weren't in on his plan or lack of. I'm now going to get into Weirdo's relationships. Family. Unknown. Assumed dead. Relationship status. Single. Best friends. Samuel Sam Craig. Matthew Raymond. Frederick Weissenstein. William White, and Father Anthony Vincent. Friends, the rest of his community. When I have made a list of Weirdo's neighbourhood community, I shall link it here. Acquaintances, his various connections and other Medjugorje civilians. Rivals, frenemies, disliked people. Chasina Bat Zedekiah, frenemy. Enemies and nemesis, unspecified. Weirdo has a long kill list of his enemies, but he doesn't share their names. Pets. Goat. That's her name. It's the only name she responds to. Goat is a white pygmy goat, whom he got from a farm sanctuary in England, because she was too cute. He keeps her in the back garden of his hotel and is something of an attraction there, being very friendly with children and loving to play. When she's old enough, Weirdo eventually has employees that milk her and make cheese out of her milk, which he sells in his store, although there's not much of it. At the beginning of the story, Goat is 2 years old and happy. Pix and Newton. These are 2 dogs Weirdo has rescued. Pix, a Kangal female dog, is missing her right back leg, while Newton, a Saint Bernard dog, doesn't have his left eye and part of his left ear is missing, and that side of his face is also heavily scarred. Weirdo got Pix from a dog shelter in France while on a trip there. She had been rescued from an abusive home where her leg had to be amputated. She was considered unadoptable due to her aggressive attitude from being abused, but due to his abilities, Weirdo was able to get through to her. Weirdo found Newton in the mountains of Switzerland, injured and underfed, so took him home. When the story begins, Pix and Newton are both 3 years old and have become lovely, friendly and calm house pets, with which children love to play with. They are both very protective of Weirdo and growl whenever they sense he might be in danger, even attempting to attack if there was ever a need to. Here's some random information that doesn't really fit anywhere. Weirdo isn't a fan of Halloween. While he doesn't hate it, he certainly doesn't participate in it. He does like the days after Halloween though, for all the cheap candy at the stores. Pet peeves. People chewing loudly or with an open mouth. He just finds it gross and annoying. People trying to talk to him while he's eating, in deep thought or busy. He doesn't like being disturbed in these moments. Quiet sneezes. It just rubs him the wrong way. His tail is very sensitive, and while he doesn't mind people gently holding it to look at it, sometimes even fiddling with it himself when thinking, he hates people yanking on it, rubbing his fur the wrong way. Weirdo's expression is only a variant of different types of smiles. If he ever gets the occasion to, Weirdo will request someone to pat his hair. This happens very rarely, but when it does happen, he just melts and makes a sound that's similar to a low purring, like a rumble in his chest. When he wants to, Weirdo can force a posh British or Cockney accent as a joke. With all that out of the way, I can get started on his story. However, because of spoilers and such, I can't go into too much detail of anything. So if things seem really vague or have plot holes, that's because I can't get into it. Story. Nothing is known of Weirdo's past. He arrived at Medjugorje aged 22, the reason being that he met Father Anthony Vincent in Fatima, Portugal, the latter being on a pilgrimage there with a group of his community, and Weirdo had just been hanging around the place. Once the two started talking and getting along, Weirdo decided he wanted to live in Medjugorje, and although the specific reasons why are unknown, people assume it's because the country is a place where mishaps like him are normal and not feared. Having moved there, he quickly fit into the neighbourhood, getting involved with everything and everyone. While others were a little unsure of him at first due to his quirky ways, Father Anthony Vincent took him under his wing and helped him to integrate into the community properly. Weirdo moved into a house beside an old run-down building on top of a hill, which he had promised upon becoming a citizen that he would turn into a hotel of sorts. Within the first year of living there, the building was completely renovated and turned into a hotel but can take around 80 people. Due to the lack of hotels in the area, only rentable apartments being available, Weirdo's hotel, named Hotel Pax Animi, became almost like a huge attraction for the locals. This helped Weirdo become more liked and popular in the community, mainly because his hotel is top-notch and that one can rent the place for parties. The building, when Weirdo bought it, came with a huge garden, So that in itself is an attraction, since once it was cleaned up and paths were cleared, it became a popular and well-liked mini park of sorts. Not only did this give the area a new place in the open to hang out, but it also gave people jobs. Thanks to his skills and knowledge in business and general hotel-related things, Weirdo was able to increase his area and hotel's popularity online, so tourists started to stay at his hotel, and by the time he's 27, his hotel is very successful and highly thought of. However, while Weirdo has done a lot for his community, the Medju Masina Police Force, or MPF for short, has arrested him over 100 times. The reason for his arrest vary on the occasion, but most of them have been due to one policewoman, Chasina Badzidikaya, suspecting him of causing a crime. These involved Weirdo being suspected of multiple types of murder, although mostly homicide, of torturing victims, blackmailing and bribing possible suspects or witnesses, owning illegal weaponry, and cannibalism. There was no real connection between the victims other than the manner of their deaths, which tended to be extremely brutal and cruel, and due to the placing of where Weirdo was at each time of the murders, he was always the primary suspect. However, he was released every time due to the lack of evidence and to Weirdo always having a strong alibi. Chasina is the chief police of the Special Cases Department, which deals with mishaps like Weirdo, and Child Protection Department. As well as making the arrest, she also interrogated him every single time, and while the lack of evidence let Weirdo go free each time, Chasina has been suspicious of him since the beginning and keeps a close eye on him, considering him a dangerous threat. The rest of the MPF think that Chasina is being harsh on Weirdo, but seeing how Chasina is a mishap herself, as well as an OG of the MPF, nobody dares question her. They just let her do her thing since it's her department anyway. Overall, the MPF actually like Weirdo because of what he's done for Medju Masina. While the first few times Weirdo was arrested made people a little worried and frightened of him, by the time he's 27, people started ignoring the arrests and it has become a running joke among his circle of friends. However, Chasina is correct in suspecting Weirdo to be dangerous, for Weirdo did commit most of these crimes listed above, and only Weirdo knows the full truth. He does these things because of his part-time mercenary job. People contact him in various ways, usually through the dark web, although sometimes they pretend to be tourists. His employers then tell him his target, the reason why they want the target gone, how they want them gone, and the rewards. Rewards don't necessarily mean money, but anything that Weirdo wants, such as certain foods, weapons, resources, information, connections, or something only the employer can provide. He'll only accept a job that interests him, be it because of common interest, the temptation of the reward, or the enjoyment of killing. Weirdo only accepts jobs in which the target is a bad person, because he thinks it makes his actions justifiable. When and how Weirdo started doing these kinds of jobs is unknown. Besides this, over the years of living in Medju Masina, Weirdo has gotten 3 pets: Goat the goat, Pix and Newton the dogs, as well as several close friends. Samuel Sam Craig, a bartender at a bar near Weirdo's house, is considered his best friend, since the two are almost inseparable. Weirdo also seems to have created a sort of father-son bond with Father Anthony Vincent, who is the reason he even moved to Medju Masina. And while the latter finds that inappropriate as a priest, Weirdo seems to depend on the priest's care and help, so Father Anthony is considered by many in the community as Weirdo's parent figure. This is reinforced by how when Weirdo needed to register with the Medju Masina Council to become an official citizen, he had Smith as a generic last name, which he wanted to change, so with permission he took the name of Vincent. Outside of this, nothing is known of Weirdo's life. When asked about his parents, Weirdo just shrugged, saying he never knew them. People then assume that because of this he grew up in an orphanage, or that he grew up on the streets of Ireland, the only place Weirdo will admit he comes from. When asked more about his past, education, heritage, or when and how he became a Catholic, but Weirdo would always brush off the question with either, "It wasn't anything special," or, "I don't know," depending on the question. So yeah, that's Weirdo, my oddball OC that I love. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them or elaborate on a topic that interests you. That's the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.